Of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in thanking our nurses and all those on the front line and send my condolences to all of the families of those that have died of coronavirus, including Bailey Majinga, as the Prime Minister referenced, a ticket officer who we learnt this week had died from COVID-19 in awful circumstances. Mr. Speaker, in his speech on Sunday, the Prime Minister said that we need to rapidly reverse the awful epidemic in our care homes. But earlier this year, and until the 12th of March, the government's own official advice was, and I'm quoting from it, "It remains very unlikely that people receiving care in a care home will become infected." Yesterday's ONS figures showed that at least 40% of all deaths from COVID-19 were in care homes. Does the Prime Minister accept that the government was too slow to protect people in care homes?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't true that the advice said that, and actually we brought the lockdown in care homes ahead of the general lockdown, and what we've seen is a concerted action plan to tackle what has unquestionably been an appalling epidemic in care homes, and a huge exercise in testing is going on. A further £600 million I can announce today for infection control in care homes. And yes, it is absolutely true that the number of casualties has been too high, but I can tell the House, as I told the Honourable Gentleman, last week and indeed this week, the number of outbreaks is down and the number of fatalities in care homes is now well down. There is much more to do, but we are making progress, Mr. Speaker.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised the Prime Minister queries the advice of his own government up to the 12th of March. I do, of course, welcome any fall in the recorded numbers, as he's right to reference that, but the Prime Minister must still recognise the numbers are still very high. The Daily Telegraph this week carried the following quote from a cardiologist: "We discharged known, suspected and unknown cases into care homes which were unprepared, with no formal warning that patients were infected, no testing available and no PPE to prevent transmission. We actively seeded this into the very population that was most vulnerable." Does the Prime Minister accept that the cardiologist is right about this?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have the utmost respect for all our medical profession who are doing an extraordinary job in very difficult circumstances, but I can tell the House is that actually the number of discharges from hospitals into care homes went down in March and April, and we had a system of testing people going into care homes, and that testing is now being ramped up across all the 15,000 care homes in this country.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I want to probe the figures the Prime Minister has given us a little bit further. The ONS records the average number of deaths in care homes each month. For the last 5 years, the average for April has been just over 8,000. This year, the number of deaths in care homes for April was a staggering 26,000. That's 3 times the average, 18,000 additional deaths this April. Using the government's figures, only 8,000 are recorded as COVID deaths. That leaves 10,000 additional and unexplained care home deaths this April. Now, I know the government must have looked into this. So can the Prime Minister give us the government's views on these unexplained deaths?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, coronavirus is an appalling disease which afflicts some groups far more than others. I think the whole country understands, and in particular the elderly. And he's right to draw attention, as I've said, to the tragedy that has been taking place in care homes. The Office of National Statistics is responsible for producing the data that they have. The government has also produced data which not only shows that there has been, as I say, a terrible epidemic in care homes, but since the since the Care Homes Action Plan began, we are seeing an appreciable and substantial reduction, not just in the number of outbreaks, but also in the number of deaths. And I want to stress to the House and also to the country that solving the problem in care homes is going to be absolutely critical. Getting the R down, not just in care homes, but across the country, is going to be absolutely critical to our ability to move forward as a nation with the stepped programme that I announced on Sunday. We must fix it, and we will.
Starmer.
The Prime Minister says that solving the problem in care homes is crucial, but that can only happen if the numbers are understood. And therefore I was disappointed that the Prime Minister doesn't have an answer to the pretty obvious question as to what are those 10,000 unexplained deaths. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the overall figures given by the government at the press conference for those that have died from COVID-19 was 32,692, each one a tragedy. For many weeks, the government has compared the UK number against other countries. Last week, I showed the Prime Minister his own slide, showing that the UK now has the highest death total in Europe and second highest in the world. A version of this slide has been shown at the number 10 press conference every day since the 30th of March. That's 7 weeks. Yesterday, the government stopped publishing the international comparison and the slide is gone. Why?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as he knows very well, the UK has been going through an unprecedented, once-in-a-century epidemic, and he seeks to make comparisons with other countries which I'm advised are premature, because the correct and final way of making these comparisons will be when we have all the excess death totals for all the relevant countries. We do not yet have that data. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to try to pretend to the House that the figures, when they are finally confirmed, are anything other than stark and deeply, deeply horrifying. This has been an appalling epidemic. What I can tell the House is that we are getting those numbers down, the numbers of deaths are coming down, the numbers of hospital admissions are coming down. Thanks to the hard work of the British people in reducing the R, Mr. Speaker, and reducing those numbers of fatalities, we are now in a position to make some small, modest steps to begin to come out of some of the very restrictive measures that we've had. I think people do understand what we're trying to do as a country, and as for the international comparisons that he seeks to draw now, I think he will have to contain his impatience.
Keir Starmer.
Well, I'm baffled. It's not me seeking to draw the comparisons. These are the government slides that have been used for 7 weeks to reassure the public. And the problem with the Prime Minister's answer is it's pretty obvious that for 7 weeks, when we weren't the highest number in Europe, they were used for comparison purposes. As soon as we hit that an enviable place, they've been dropped. And last week he quoted in defence Professor Spiegel-Halter. What Professor Spiegel-Halter said at the weekend was this, and we need to think about it. We should use other countries to try and learn why our numbers are so high. And so dropping the comparisons means dropping the learning, and that's the real risk. I want to ask the Prime Minister now about the changes that are coming to effect today. A real concern for many people is childcare. I want to quote a mother of a young child. I apologise that it's a little lengthy, but it reflects the queries that all members of this House will have been getting. She says this: as Boris said in his speech, people are encouraged to go back to work, meaning my partner, as he works in construction. My partner has explained to his boss this can't happen because we've got no childcare. He also rang the nursery, but they're not open. I work as well, but my boss is having none of it. I hope I can get some advice. Me and my partner have been so stressed all day. What advice would the Prime Minister give her?
Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Just on his earlier point about not learning from other countries, nothing could be further from the truth. We are watching intently what is happening in other countries, and it is very notable that in some other countries where relaxations have been introduced, there is the signs of the R going up again. And that's a very clear warning to us not to proceed too fast or too reckless. And I hope that I hope the country does understand that. On the specific point that he rightly raises about people's anxieties about going back to work when they don't have adequate childcare, I think I was very clear both with him and with the House earlier in the week that insofar as people may not be able to go back to work because they don't have the childcare that they need, then their employers must be understanding. And it is clearly, as I said, an impediment. It's a barrier to your ability to go back to work if you don't have childcare. I'd be very happy to look at the specific case that he raises if there's anything more that we can do to shed light on the matter.
Keir Starmer.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for indicating he'll look into that particular case. It's one, I think, of very many. The Prime Minister is asking the country to support decisions that will affect millions of lives. These are not easy decisions, I recognise that. They're very difficult, balanced decisions that the Prime Minister and the Government has to make. After the confusion of the last few days, gaining public confidence in them is crucial. Crucial. The Prime Minister says his decisions were, and I quote, driven by the science, the data and public health. So to give the public confidence in the decisions, can the Prime Minister commit to publishing the scientific advice that the decisions were based on?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, all sage advice is published in due course, as the right honourable gentleman knows. And let me be absolutely clear with the House that SAGE has been involved in every stage and our scientists and our medical officers have been involved in every stage of preparing this strategy. And I want to remind the House that what we are doing is entirely conditional and provisional. The UK has made a huge amount of progress. The people of this country have worked incredibly hard to get the R down. We cannot now go back to square one. We can't risk a second outbreak, and we will do everything to avoid that. I think that actually when they look at what we're advocating as the way forward, the stepped process that we have set out, I think people can see exactly what we're trying to do as a country, and they can see that everybody is still required to obey the social distancing laws, the social distancing rules. And the common sense of the British people got us through that first phase of this disease. I'm absolutely confident they will get us through the next as well.